The Trump administration has quietly contradicted its own narrative about the ICE agents who shot and killed Alex Pretti in Minneapolis this weekend. Originally, White House officials accused Pretti of being a domestic terrorist who wanted to attack these officers, but the DHS's own findings show that that wasn't true. That's in addition to all of the eyewitness footage and testimony that we can clearly see. But that doesn't mean that the administration is going to do the right thing. Blink and you'll miss this story. But yesterday, PBS reported that a Customs and Border Patrol official told Congress in a notice sent Tuesday what really happened in the shooting and killing of Alex Pretti. This didn't happen in a press conference. It happened in a routine slip of paper, but it shows just how deep the contradictions in the Trump administration really go. According to this notification obtained by the Associated Press, one Border Patrol officer fired his Glock and a CBP officer fired his. That means two different agents of the US shot and killed Alex Pretti, contradicting the narrative that Pretti was the antagonist in the situation. These investigators from the Office of Professional Responsibility at Customs and Border Patrol conducted the analysis based on a review of body-worn camera footage and agency documentation, similar to the eyewitness footage that was available online for everyone to see what really happened. This notice also officially says that officers tried to take Pretti into custody and he resisted, leading to a struggle. During that struggle, a Border Patrol agent yelled, "He's got a gun," multiple times. It's also notable that we don't yet know the identities of these officers. Compare that to what we know about the shooting earlier this month in Minneapolis when ICE agent Jonathan Ross shot and killed Renee Good. After the massive backlash sparked by that incident, it seems like the government is protecting the identities of the agents who killed Alex Pretti. And that's no surprise given the victim blaming tactics that the Trump administration rushed to use against him. NPR reports that right after the shooting, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was quick to describe Pretty's actions as domestic terrorism. She said that Pretti was attacking officers and brandishing a weapon before he was killed. And Stephen Miller, a close advisor to Donald Trump, described Pretti as a would-be assassin in a similar social media post. Now, based on the evidence we have, we all know that none of that is true. In fact, in the videos, Pretti can be seen holding only a phone in his hand before at least 6 officers tackled him, pinned him face down on the ground, and shot him in the back, firing 10 shots. NPR reports that one eyewitness said in a court document that Pretti was not even facing the agents when they grabbed him. It did not look like he was trying to resist, just trying to help a woman up, they said. The Trump administration at large and the federal agencies under it have destroyed any trust the American public can have in their accounting of what happened in this case or in any others. But even in official documentation, their story contradicts what these Trump administration officials are saying. While they still claimed that Alex Pretti resisted arrest, they did note that he was not attacking officers or threatening him with a weapon, as the administration first said. NPR reports that this preliminary CBP assessment describes how officers were initially confronted by 2 women who were blowing whistles while they conducted an immigration enforcement operation. Quote, "The officer pushed them both away, and one of the females ran to a male, later identified as 37-year-old Alex Jeffrey Pretti, a U.S. citizen. The officer attempted to move the woman and Pretti out of the roadway. The woman and Pretti did not move." The review also adds that the officers sprayed them with pepper spray. Then, the preliminary assessment says CBP officers attempted to take Pretti into custody and a struggle ensued. Asked about this report on Tuesday, Stephen Miller said in a statement that the extra personnel sent to Minnesota for force protection should be used to create a physical barrier between arrest teams and the disruptors. But there's no effort here to dispel the smear campaign that Miller and other White House officials immediately launched in the wake of Pretty's death. That's no surprise coming from an administration that uses victim blaming like its official policy. But on the ground in Minnesota, with state officials, the way the Trump administration has been acting isn't necessarily going to fly. Al Jazeera reported on Tuesday that a Minnesota judge has ordered the chief of ICE to appear in court. Specifically, the judge wrote, "This court has been extremely patient with respondents, even though respondents decided to send thousands of agents to Minnesota to detain aliens without making any provision for dealing with the hundreds of habeas petitions and other lawsuits that were sure to result. This order came after Trump yanked Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino out of the state following Pretty's death and decided to replace him with border czar Tom Homan. Now, a lot of news outlets have been reporting this as if ICE is backing out of Minnesota or that it will be removed completely. But Nicole Badera, a sociologist who's actually based on the ground in Minneapolis, posted on Blue Sky a reminder that ICE hasn't slowed down in Minneapolis at all. Outside of Minnesota, it might feel like everything has changed since Alex Pretty's murder, but ICE hasn't actually lost any power, and they're continuing to terrorize our communities. And Minneapolis isn't the only place where ICE is continuing this brutal crackdown on citizens and non citizens alike. Ultimately, nobody deserves the type of treatment that ICE has levied at people in the streets, and it's continuing this crackdown in places like Portland, Maine, Philadelphia, and other places around the US, particularly targeting blue cities that did not vote for Trump overwhelmingly in the last election. It's a form of political retaliation described as immigrations and customs enforcement, but it's going after anyone. This type of conduct is exactly why a Minnesota judge is demanding that the head of ICE show up in court. It's egregious behavior. And specifically, the judge wrote that he recognizes ordering the head of a federal agency to appear personally is extraordinary. Quote, the extent of ICE's violation of court orders is likewise extraordinary, and lesser measures have been tried and failed. It is so important to note that due process is not taking place with regard to these ICE operations. Agents are instead snatching people up off the streets, including US citizens, based more on skin color and accent than anything to do with legal immigration status. Plus, a lot of the supposed worst of the worst criminals who are being deported were actually never convicted of a crime, and many of the offenses that they were charged or suspected of committing are not violent crimes. They're things like having an improper learner's permit on your car. So these people are being snatched up off the streets. Sometimes their children are being taken with them and detained in these horrible conditions in camps in Texas and elsewhere, and then they're being shipped off to other countries, oftentimes with no due process whatsoever. This is a massive violation of rights, and it affects everyone in America, whether you think so or not. Plus, anyone on the streets of Minneapolis, Portland, Maine, Philadelphia, or any of these places is made more unsafe by ICE being there. They are violent people terrorizing communities. Their munitions, their tear gas, and their violent altercations with bystanders could affect anyone, regardless of who you voted for, what your skin color is, or what your immigration status is. We've seen that time and time again, including in Minneapolis, but also elsewhere. And yet, despite these massive, flagrant civil rights violations, MS Now reports that Trump's Justice Department has decided there will be no civil rights investigation of the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti. Instead, 2 units of the DHS will investigate their officers and the man they killed. A Customs and Border Protection office will investigate whether its own officers followed agency policy in the shooting, while another unit will investigate whether Pretti broke any laws. That unit normally focuses on tracking down human trafficking and narcotics rings, as well as threats to national security. Now it's going to be looking into a bystander who was simply trying to help one of his neighbors get off the ground when he was tackled and shot 10 times. This is a massive miscarriage of justice, and it's redirecting away from resources to help people in legitimate crisis. Trump and his administration say that they're targeting criminals. The reality could not be more opposite. They're actually pulling away resources from targeting violent criminal networks and instead redirecting those resources and the full weight of administrative smear campaigns against victims of ICE, everyday people who do good in their community, like Alex Pretti, who was a VA nurse who put his life on the line to protect his neighbors. Rob D'Amico, a former FBI agent and MS Now contributor, had this to say. He said, the fact that this investigation has already been taken by the agency involved speaks to them not wanting any outside agency having access to the evidence, nor the ability to take statements from the agents involved. No matter how good an investigation was conducted, it gives the perception of a cover-up if charges aren't brought against the agents. That's exactly what is happening here. A complete void of accountability replaced by corruption. Now, Stacey Young, the executive director of Justice Connection, an organization that provides direct support to current and former Justice Department employees, said the administration isn't trusted to be factual after their mishandling of the Pretti shooting, as well as their mishandling of, I would argue, basically everything since Trump took office. But Young said, you see individuals are protesting, but didn't appear to incite any violence and were killed for doing so. It doesn't matter what your politics are. Anyone who believes in democracy and the rule of law should understand that exercising your First Amendment rights should not result in your death. A lot of people have referred to Alex Pretti and Renee Good as protesters or agitators or people who were putting themselves in the line of fire. But that's not even the whole story of what's happening in Minneapolis. I'm often reminded of an incident where a family was just driving down the street in Minneapolis when an ICE agent threw a flash bomb grenade into their car where all of their children, including a baby, were. The baby's mother had to perform CPR on him at the scene, and the entire family was transported to the hospital. It doesn't matter who they voted for or what their immigration status was. These were just people going about their day, targeted with unbelievable levels of violence. And as the New York Times reports, what these ICE officers are wearing and holding tells a whole story of its own. Like this now famous photo of a group of ICE agents showing up at this nurse's doorstep wearing full tactical gear. This story is from a former US soldier deployed twice to Afghanistan. And he wrote, upon closer inspection, the agent's equipment tells its own story. Their gear is the physical manifestation of decades of war, fine tuned and perfected for close quarters killing over myriad operations in faraway lands, but now wielded in broad daylight in American cities. This type of equipment is often reserved for SWAT and hostage rescue units. So here we see a suppressor. We can see the size of these guns, the level of body armor, the camouflage that they're wearing, even in the snowy streets of Minneapolis, which makes no sense whatsoever and looks ridiculous. Gibbons Neff goes on to write, in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, the US military's dominance on the battlefield was aided by advanced night vision equipment and thermal imaging technology. Troops used infrared aiming lasers that evolved from clunky looking boxes on the end of their rifles to streamlined and ergonomic tools that cost more than $3,000. And he's highlighting and zooming in on some of these things and what Border Patrol agents and ICE officers are wearing in Minneapolis to confront US citizens and just regular everyday people at their doors. At least two of the rifles have modernized black rails mounted around their barrels, which allow accessories to attach more easily. And the New York Times reports the civilian standing in the doorway at the receiving end of a swarm of well-armed federal agents was Tiana Gibson Brown. Her husband, Garrison Gibson, who is from Liberia, was arrested during the raid. In a video taken from inside the house and posted on Instagram and other social media sites, Miss Brown yells for the agents to put down their guns. There's kids in this house, Miss Brown said. Show the warrant first. This is abhorrent and should not be happening, period. But even in this New York Times article, I can't help but pick up on the sort of glorification of wartime tactics deployed against people overseas. That shouldn't be glorified either. And in fact, it reminds me of a concept called the imperial boomerang. The imperial boomerang is the theory that governments that develop repressive techniques to control colonial territories will eventually deploy those same techniques domestically against their own citizens. This concept dates back to 1950, and it was used to explain the origins of European fascism in the first half of the 20th century. What this goes to show is that this type of violence shouldn't be used against civilians or really deployed on any territories anywhere. It just contributes to more violence down the road, including against the very people who paid for, funded, and sent their troops overseas in the first place. What's happening in America now has happened to countless people around the world, sometimes because of American troops. And currently, we can't even trust our own government to tell the truth about what's happening. They're trying to slip that truth quietly into official notices while blaring a completely different story on their social media profiles to the public. Amid all of this federal corruption, going forward, people who oppose what the Trump administration is doing should take a strong anti-violence stance in general. That's the only way we're going to protect everyone, regardless of where they're from. We all have rights and we all deserve to be safe, not killed in the street simply for trying to help.